Alrighty, Devin. So what I was going to ask you is, what is your favorite podcast right now?
Right now, I got a few of them, but the one that really stands out to me is Undaunted Life.
And I think we can both say that's my favorite podcast too.
Why though?
Well, why? Because he is a great example of a disciplined, godly man that can lead. And that's another thing we can get into as well is why do you like that podcast, and how do you like his leadership role that he kind of plays with it, and how he helps other men when it comes to that?
Yeah. My favorite episode that he does every year is how to avoid being a crappy man in a certain year, whatever it is. This year was 2025, 17 ways to avoid being a crappy man in 2025. And there's so many rules. Like one of them is have a gratitude list. Have a list of things that you're grateful for. Family, friends. It could be your dog. It can be your gun. Just have a list of things you're thankful for. So when life is bringing you down, you can look at a list and be like, you know what? Life is pretty good. I got all these things to be thankful for. Another one is be joined to a local church. That's always one of them in there. And lead. Have a Bible study with men. Not only that, there's so many different things just about being a leader, being a godly leader in not only in the church, but in your home.
In your home, in your workplace, that's something that we can really dive into is leadership and how men can be better leaders in what they do. So, I mean, you can look back in history and see the leadership roles be fulfilled back to the early church days. You look at the Apostle Paul, and then you can go as far forward as today when you look at guys like Kyle Thompson with Undaunted Life, like guys like that, guys that are willing to pick up the slack and lead.
You can even go back to the garden.
Yes, you can.
It was man's job to take dominion of the earth, to lead. The buck stopped with Adam in the garden. And I mean, you could argue that the first sin was passivity. He was not leading his wife. What's interesting in Genesis is you get Eve, and she's obviously talking with the serpent, and the serpent's like, hey, you should take this fruit and all that. Just paraphrasing, obviously. And then it says she took one and she gave it to her husband who was with her, meaning he was standing right next to her while she was talking with the serpent. And instead of taking leadership and being, no, like, we don't listen to this guy.
Because Adam knew.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, it doesn't state that God told Eve. It was Adam's job to tell Eve. Yep. And that's where he failed at being a leader. And he fell right into that. Fell right into that trap and that deception from the serpent.
It was sin. He didn't lead. I mean, there's examples throughout even, but then you get to David. You look at his household. It was a mess. I mean, he led his kingdom fairly well overall. I mean, there's a couple little glitches I think we talked about last time, but he was a good leader too. But I mean, yeah, what does it mean to be a leader though in today's world? What does it mean to be a man who leads well?
We could start by saying there's so many different kinds you can go into. First and foremost, there's godly leadership. There's leadership of the household. So like husband is supposed to be that leader.
Lead his wife
kids, and his
yep.
family, right? Especially towards Christian values and loving Jesus, right? And then you get leadership outside of the home and outside of the church, where it's like leadership at work,
yep.
or leadership per se for soldiers. You got to have leaders out there in the battlefield, especially when things get crazy.
And you better be men.
And you got to be men. You got to be men about it. And sometimes, even though it can, I've heard so many different stories about men that always regret, like, how they had to leave their families and go fight for whatever conflict was going on. But it's like, that's still being a leader. Like that was one tough generation. The generations that fought in those wars, tough generations of leaders, guys that are willing to put their lives on the line, lead their brothers to push back darkness. It's kind of a crazy thing to think about in that way.
Not only that, you think about the men who wanted to defend their country. Even the young men, the boys, 16-year-old boys. I mean, there's lots of stories of them sneaking into the military. The fact, I mean, that was, this 15-year-old boy sneaking in to serve his country, to push back darkness across the sea that's going to come into the country if that not for them going over and pushing back.
Exactly.
And these men did that to protect the innocent.
That's where you get families becoming tough too, especially when the man of the house is gone. It's like the rest of the family has to be reliant on each other and reliant on God in those situations, right?
It's a pretty cool thing when you go back and you look at especially World War II. They were called the greatest generation for a reason. But just the way those men, they knew they were going to go over there to die. The chances of them coming back was very low, and they did it anyways, and they did it happily.
Yeah. Well, maybe not quite happily, but they did it proudly.
A lot of them, yes. Yeah.
A lot of them that probably did it happily, but those guys were kind of like, they've already seen a lot of combat, and they're like, or whatever. Very experienced, or they weren't right in the front lines, or whatever the case may be. But I'm sure that you look back at D-Day, there was a lot of guys that were throwing up, that were scared that they were going to die, but yet they were still willing to run out of that U-boat, or not U-boat, sorry, but that boat, that landing boat. U-boats are subs, but but
have you ever watched documentaries on YouTube of these things, like of World War II soldiers that are now in their 90s?
I've seen interviews and stuff like that, and some of them are just so intense.
Yeah, well, and
especially there's one about Iwo Jima in the Pacific. That one was crazy. They figured, like, oh man, yeah, there's not very many Japanese on this island, but they dug tunnels all over that island, everywhere. The Japanese would all of a sudden pop up in all sorts of places and just start shooting at them, right? And then the States would just all of a sudden line up their battleships and start shooting back, and it's just them. It's just insane. But they would just dig into these trenches, and then units of these Marines would have to go and clear these trenches and these bunkers and tunnels one by one, inch by inch.
Yep.
So many people got killed there.
I can't remember the soldier's name, but he talked about stories of him walking in the dark with his unit, or maybe he was by himself. I think he got separated from his unit, and he saw some men in the distance, and you could tell they were Japanese soldiers, and he lifted up his gun. He took out all of them there with his M1 Grand, and he could see this man talking about it. You could see the emotion in his eyes for that.
Well, imagine just having memories like that. That's haunting.
Yeah.
It's got to be scary too. Like, just even thinking about those stories and picturing them in my head, where they're clearing these tunnels. You don't know where these guys are hiding. They know these tunnels. Like, the Japanese knew these tunnels so well because they lived in them. How scary would that be? You're walking into an unfamiliar, dark tunnel. You don't know when you're going to get shot or stabbed or what.
It's about
and yet those guys still led. They still got in there, dug in.
They did it.
And they cleared it, right?
Yep. I think about even a story, I can't remember the soldier's name, but he was one of the guys running a landing boat. And he'd go back and forth the ship, pick up men. The first one, he let down the hatch, and as soon as he let it down, all the guys were dead. Instantly.
On D-Day?
Pretty much instantly. He went back, loaded up again, came back. Pretty much the same thing. A couple guys maybe got off, the guys that jumped over the sides. And he said then I think it was this time, he walked to the front because he couldn't lift up the landing ramp because someone's body was in the way. Man. And so he had to get out there, and this guy was 18? I think he was 18. He was a young man anyways. And so he had to move the dead body and crawl through his buddies to do this. And then he went back, got another one. He did. I can't remember how many loads of men. And most of them, he said the last group most of them got out, good chunk of them. But he said after that, I think he only did a few, and then he was done. Like he just mentally. And I think they ended up relieving him because of that. But I think about that, and that man, to push back darkness, to literally get on the beaches of Normandy, what he had to witness to do that. And
the scars that are left in a guy's mind after seeing stuff like that.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
I like to think about our spiritual life with the imagery of war. I think it's a really good picture of it.
Well, it's because we are in a spiritual war, right?
But I think about this, and we could get into why men need each other. And one of the reasons is when you're dug into a foxhole, you're both up there, you're shooting. You think about, okay, for instance, if I'm sure lots of people have watched the battle. Oh, what's it called now? Why am I there? Band of Brothers, yes. And you think about the Battle of the Bulge, digging up the foxholes and then being bombarded constantly, watching your friends get blown apart by mortars, and
watching people take hits.
Yep, and watching also, not only that, there was guys that were basically freezing to death in there. I just love this imagery as you're in a foxhole and you and your brother in arms are firing at the enemy, and your buddy gets hit. You pull him down, you bandage him up, and you get back up there, and you defend him, and you shoot. And
that's why it's a direct correlation to the spiritual warfare, where it's good to be surrounded by men that are strong spiritually, that are there to help you through whatever struggles or whatever attacks you have that are coming against you spiritually, especially, right? And they are there to help you out, lift you up, and that's why a foxhole is a foxhole.
It's not only that. When someone goes down, you get down with him and you bandage him up and you pull him off. And there's some amazing imagery there too of fellow believers helping each other, pushing back darkness together. And when one goes down, they help him up and they take him back to safety. And we can get into men having men next to them. We could get into that too. That's important. That's important for building leadership in men.
Yeah. Building leadership, building spiritual brotherhood, and building an actual bond, right? And also, it is great too when it comes to accountability.
Yeah.
So in a foxhole, you might have a guy that might start going a little bit rogue, right? Might start walking off that path and wanting to get out and get into a line of fire where he might get shot or hit, get attacked, right? And then you compare that to when it comes to spiritual fighting. In the spiritual war, he could all of a sudden get hit with whatever and fall into a harsh sin. And he needs his brothers to help him get back down, get bandaged up,
get him up,
back into the fight.
Get back into the fight, yeah.
That's the way I like to think about it. Yeah. You fall down, you can and by Christ's stripes and by what happened to him and the punishment that we deserve, but he took on his shoulders, we can pretty much harness that and help each other. And Christ is there to help you. He's there to lift you up.
Yep. And he uses fellow believers, fellow brothers to do so oftentimes.
Yep. And that's the coolest part about it is like, you don't know when it's hard for actually a guy to know when he is being used by God in specific moments. And especially like there's a lot of certain times where it's like you feel like nothing's really going on, but truly God is using you in a mighty way that you just don't realize yet.
Yep.
And that's something that I find quite cool. Like I could name off an example, but I'm gonna keep it a little bit brief on that. But it's like I'd feel like I was being annoyed, and it was like, man, come on. And then it's like it kicked in where some of the stuff like that felt like an annoyance to me was actually like a huge help to this person.
Yep.
And it's like, wow.
And
you hear that, or you feel that, or it finally clicks into your mind, and it's like, whoa, God used me in a mighty way there.
Well, and it's one of those things you got to be careful with too, because it can become an annoyance when you have to help someone up. You have to keep grabbing them and lifting them up and helping them walk. That can be a bit of annoyance. It's like, dude, just get up and walk on your own.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when someone is spiritually injured, they need someone to help them. And
sometimes you don't realize how injured they really are.
Exactly.
When it comes in the spiritual life. Like you might think that it's not that bad, but really it's actually killing them. Like it's horrible.
And I just think about it in my own life. I am thankful for the times I pour into people, and I don't think that the pouring in that I'm doing to that person is going to do anything. I'm just like, I'm doing it because this is what I'm called to do. God says to do this. Make disciples is one of his calls, and this is part of that. But I am thankful for when I have fellow believers, fellow brothers, for when I stumble, when I'm struggling with sin, or not only just struggling with sin, but when spiritually I'm struggling, when the enemy is coming against me, when I have fellow brothers to pick me back up, bring me to cover, and open fire for me.
It's awesome to think about, and that's another example I could think of is you.
Mm-hmm.
You have been a foxhole bro to me for a long time now, Devin. And it's just, I remember going through times where it's just like I felt like I was constantly bombarded. And I'd call you up, tell you about whatever it may be, whether it was like a dream or whether it was just something that was happening in my life. It was like you were there to kind of help me out when it comes to kind of interpreting the situation or just like praying for me. And that's a huge help. And that's another thing too, is pray for your brothers, pray for your families, pray for everybody, I guess, but like especially pray for your brothers that are in your foxhole, that are really tight with you. And it's like prayer makes such a crazy impact on a person's life.
And you don't realize it, you don't see it. But if you use Daniel as an example, and he prayed to God, and it took, we just did a Bible study through Daniel. How long did it take Daniel to get his prayer answered, for Michael to get to him?
It took, how long did it take? I can't remember. I might pull it up.
Yeah, you could pull it up. But basically, he was praying and praying and praying about a situation, and finally, Michael shows up, and he's like, yep, sorry, I was battling the prince of Persia. And in the spiritual realm, he was doing battle for you.
And behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. Then he said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision is for the days yet to come.
So 21 days.
21 days.
It took, so that's just it. The power of prayer you don't necessarily see right away. I mean, there's been times where I've prayed for stuff for years and years and years. And then sometimes I'll be praying and I'll realize, like, wait, why am I praying this still? This was answered.
Yeah, it was answered to me already, right?
Yeah. Yeah, just because it becomes a habit actually at some point. Praying at times, which we could get into that, which we're not going to. But you end up praying for stuff. And then you realize it came true, and you realize you've been praying for it still for the last year, but yet it came true a year ago. God answered that prayer. But
that's something that you can get in the habit with, especially with your brothers. And it's still not bad to pray those prayers, because even if that prayer was answered, there's still going to be more in that person's life that you can pray about.
And some of them you don't know about. Yeah,
exactly. Some things you just don't know about. But when it comes to praying, we should, that's a whole episode in itself.
We'll get into
probably a whole week of episodes, right? But
with all of this talk, we could go into, there's so many aspects of being a leader, not just leading the charge spiritually. I think everything you do is leading the charge spiritually. Everything you do in leadership is leading in that way. But the question I have for you, I should frame this a little bit. So most of the time when you see people talking about being a leader, especially men being a leader, they're talking about men leading their wife, or men leading their children and their wife, obviously. But we're both single.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? What does that look like for me and you as single men that are pursuing God?
One thing that I see is it's kind of like tightening up those bootstraps and being more out there when it comes to taking the lead on certain things. And that's something that I'm still trying to grow with, is in my leadership skills. So like when it comes to work, I'm just trying to be a lot more up front and be able to talk more and be like, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing, or whatever the case may be. And just simple stuff like that,
Yeah.
I see is going to help me grow to become a better leader and a better leader.
Communicating, right?
Communication. And then another thing too is I'm trying to become a better leader in a spiritual way where I'm able to answer questions or lead in a Bible study or whatever the case may be, which I've been doing a little bit here and there, right? Is leading in those. And something I just intend to grow more and more with. And I can only see it going well. And doing that is also helping those that are watching you too. Like, oh man, that guy, he's really stepped it up a little bit. What is he doing that's different than what I'm doing? What can I do to make myself or help myself become a better leader? And it's like, I want to be kind of that person that somebody can look to and be, man, okay, that guy's taking the steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll follow suit. So I think about my little brother that way.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things too that I can learn from my little brother. And that's the thing. You can learn from everybody, and that only can help you become better in that way where you can lead.
Well, I think of the Apostle Paul when he says to the Corinthian church, I'm blanking, but anyways, he says, follow me as I follow Christ, or imitate me as I imitate Christ.
Look to Christ. Look to Christ, and that he's the prime example of a leader. And the sacrificial side of things too, like you can't get a better example of sacrifice than through Christ. And as a leader,
he sacrificed his life.
Yeah, he did. The ultimate sacrifice. And that's the thing about leaders. They have to sacrifice things. They have to sacrifice to lead.
What things do we have to sacrifice as leaders? As men, godly, manly leaders, what things do we have to sacrifice?
We have to sacrifice a lot of what we desire. And when it comes to earthly things. So when I think about that, I always think about how Christ says to pick up the cross and follow him, right? And it's like, okay, how am I going to pick up that cross and follow him? What's getting in the way? What am I thinking about that's kind of cutting into my time where I should be thinking about Christ? Or what's cutting into my time that especially when I have free time, it's like, okay, what am I doing that I could be doing something else to help me out in my spiritual growth, where I could be reading the Bible instead of watching a hockey game, right? Or whatever the case may be. And there's lots of time that I have in my life to read my Bible and all that. And it's something I'm trying to get better and better and better with.
One thing, when I think of the Bible verse, take up your cross and follow me daily.
Crucifying yourself, your flesh daily,
that
right?
would have been a pretty crazy thing for them to hear Jesus say, wait, take up your literal death machine. That's what that was there for, is for a humiliating death. And he's saying, no, take up your cross daily. Die to yourself daily. Sacrifice yourself daily.
And it's like, one thing you can go about is always think about one thing that you can just, what about myself today can I just sacrifice and pick up that cross, right? And that's something, even if it's just a little thing, it can make a huge difference, because you start going more and more into that, and it helps you overcome a lot of things where you could become more of a leader and more of a person that is seeking out after God's word, right? Or whatever the case may be.
I think every day there's different things we have to sacrifice. I think that some days there's going to be sacrificing our time, sacrificing our free time. Meaning, oh, hey, someone wants to meet up for coffee. Someone that's really hurting right now. It wants to meet up for coffee. You know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to meet up for coffee. Even though I've worked the whole day, I worked hard, and this is going to be a couple hours in my free time when I don't get to watch hockey, but you sacrifice that time. And oftentimes, when you sacrifice of yourself in some kind of way, it's way more fulfilling than doing something for yourself.
And that's something too that I think about is, what is me sitting on my couch watching a hockey game doing for the kingdom of God? What's it doing for in my life that is going to benefit me? Yeah. It's really not.
It's bringing you pleasure.
It's bringing me pleasure. It's bringing me joy. Watching that, when like you said, somebody could be hurting, want to go out for a coffee, whatever the case may be. And you could go and be there sacrificing that hour and a half,
Yeah.
3 hours of watching a hockey game. You can sacrifice that time to go and be with this person. And who knows? Through that, they could, like, it could change their life. Something as simple as that could change somebody's life.
Well, a couple things too. Like, I want to make sure spending time watching hockey or whatever once in a while is a good thing. Like, that's
it's not a bad thing or anything.
You gotta watch Connor McDavid do Connor McDavid things once in a while. But I think what we're trying to get at is sacrificing your time, which is a big thing actually. Time is fleeting. I mean, it's moving all the time. It runs out at some point for us. Sacrificing your time is a massive sacrifice for someone, for the kingdom of God. I think that not only do we sacrifice for, going out for coffee with someone or just sitting down with someone and talking with them, I think there's other sacrifices we can make. I think we can make sacrifices in the local church, meaning, you know what? I'm going to go on Thursday nights and I'm going to help with the junior youth. I'm going to help lead it. I'm going to go enjoy these 12-year-olds and they're in their wildness. But I'm going to pour my life into these kids. Or I'm going to pour my life into these youth kids, or I'm going to pour my life into young adults, whatever that looks like. Pour your life into it and give yourself to it. And it's something that when I look back on, I'm thankful for all the people that poured into me while I was a teenager and all the people that are pouring into me now. I'm thankful for that. And I want to pour out myself for people so that I can see their relationship with Christ flourish. Yeah. And then at some point, guess what? It's a bleeding effect, because at some point when you do the work for those people, even though you might not see it, at some point those people grow up and they're pouring into other people. If you want to go back, that's how the gospel got spread to begin with.
That was the whole focus of the church. That's the Great Commission.
That's why it blew up, because people talked with people and there was relationships, and then they were like, this is pretty good news. Let's go talk to someone else. And they did. And then they made disciples of these people.
And it all starts with sacrifice.
Exactly.
Sacrifice and mercy and grace.
Jesus sacrificed himself, and he tells us to die to ourselves daily, to sacrifice of ourselves.
Sacrifice, that's podcast in itself, just talking about that.
Yeah.
It comes in so many different shapes and sizes and what it means and all that. And there's definitely, we didn't get every little bit of it covered at all, like barely dug into it, but sacrifice is just a big word that it in all reality means so much in so many different ways. But that's just another topic for another time, really, because we'd be talking for all night if we were just talking about sacrifice.
Oh yeah.
Talking about earthly sacrifice all the way to godly sacrifice.
Yeah. Well,
but I think what the point is it's a trait of leadership.
Yeah. What can we do? We're two single guys. Okay, I should answer this because I already asked you this a little bit. And I think we've already answered this somewhat. For single guys, we have more time than a lot of people do. We have a lot of time than a man who is married, a man who has a couple kids. We have a lot more time on our hands. So we should be spending a lot more energy too, I should say. We should be spending our time pouring into other people around us, whether that's the men around us that are in our foxhole, or whether that is going to the church, spending time there, spending time with the junior youth, spending time with the kids, spending time. It doesn't matter, but we're pouring of ourselves. Now, I think there's other things we could talk about too. As young single men, I think we could talk about leading in our discipline. How do we spend our time? When we wake up in the morning, how are we spending our time? And this is something I struggle with. Not gonna lie.
Oh, me too. And it goes beyond morning too. Like, especially, there's so many different things that I kind of regret, especially just from last year. So me and Deb, we're both big time hunters.
Way too big of hunters.
I'm crazy about the hunting. I sacrifice a little bit too much for hunting, where I should be sacrificing a little bit not too much. You can't sacrifice too much for it, but I should sacrifice a little bit of that time to spending time, especially when it comes to young adults. Yeah. There's some times where I missed it because I was out hunting, right? Or whatever the case may be.
Very much.
Hey. But regardless, it's little things like that where it's like I had lots of time. All I was doing was sitting in a tree stand. There was nothing moving around. Yeah. Like I could have easily come, but I didn't. And it's just things like that. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with sitting in a tree
No.
stand. I'm not.
Sometimes Joby Martin preaches.
Like as Devin said, and I know we're gonna go there, but as Devin said, there's nothing wrong with spending time watching a hockey game, watching Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Edmonton Oilers, right? But
only the best team. Well, I shouldn't say the best team, but
like, there's nothing wrong with spending time doing things that you like that give you joy. But also, you gotta have joy though too to do the work, like to do some work for the Lord, like to give some time to the Lord, to give some time to the church, and some time to the Great Commission, right? And that's the thing.
Well, I think that, okay, so you look at Joby Martin, for instance. Every Monday, he goes out and he sits in his deer stand or whatever. Even though it's not be hunting season, he goes and sits there, and that's how he writes his sermons. He spends time alone. I mean, Jesus went off to the wilderness to pray. He went and spent time alone, oftentimes. And it said he went up and he prayed by himself. And so it's a good thing for us to have something, a getaway. That's a really good thing to recharge and to be able to go back out. But I think that's just what it is.
But you also got to watch for distractions doing that too.
Exactly. I think we have to be careful as Christians to make sure that we love the giver more than the gift, because all these things are gifts from God.
It is. That's exactly right. And you mentioned that especially last year quite a bit.
Yeah.
That was a big topic actually of yours, and it's something that got me thinking a lot too. Was, all right, I got to be a lot more appreciative. I'm taking things for granted here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was taking way too many things for granted. It's like the only reason why I'm enjoying this is because God gave it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so why am I why am I not thinking about that as much as I should be? And it's just because you get so used to it that it's just kind of, you don't think about it too much. And then you do start thinking about it. It's like, man, how awesome is that? Like, as the other day, we were talking about the creation a little bit.
Yep.
It's like,
these are great things.
Tonight we seen Northern Lights.
Yeah, they were pretty good tonight.
And that's something that it's like gorgeous. And that's a gift from God to see that.
And that's just
God's
it.
Creation.
You have to remember that all these things are gifts from God. Our vehicles are gifts from God. I mean, how cool is it that we can drive wherever we want to? That's pretty cool. The Northern Lights are gifts from God. Being able to go out and hunting is a gift from God. Our health is a gift from God. We have to remember, though, that they're gifts from the giver of these gifts. Our praise, our time, should be going to the giver. And we should be giving the majority of our time seeing his kingdom furthered. You know, going back to the topic of leadership, though, and leading in disciplines, this is something that I need to work on. That means getting up earlier, waking up a little earlier, even if it's just half an hour earlier than I normally get up, to spend time in God's word. And not only that, but instead of waking up and being like, oh, I wonder what's on Instagram this morning, rather than that, putting my phone aside, going downstairs, just to say first, starting the coffee up, sitting down, reading a bit of the Bible. Once the coffee's brewed, grab a cup of coffee, sit down a bit longer, read the Bible, read a chapter of the Bible. Or if you have a bit more time, read 2 chapters, depending on how long.
That's something I struggle with too, especially in the morning.
Yeah.
And the morning is the most important time to do it.
Yep.
Because then you have something to think about.
You're feeding yourself for the day.
You're meditating on it all throughout the day, especially if you keep thinking about it. Right?
Yep.
It is important to do that, and that's something I'm trying to get more into the habit of as well.
Yeah,
doing that, and I do struggle.
Yeah, it is a struggle, but I think not only that, I think going to bed earlier, trying to make sure you're like, you know what, I'm going to be conscientious with my time. I'm going to go to bed a good bit earlier. I'm going to put my phone across the room, and outside the room if you can, and I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to read the Bible with no distractions.
And that's something that it's actually kind of helped me out a little bit, was how my schedule changed with work a little bit. So it's right now things are getting really soft throughout the day with how warm it gets getting, but during the night it's still freezing. So I'm able to get out. I wake up at 3 a.m, get in my grader for 4 or 5 a.m, whatever the case may be, and waking up earlier like that is I'm getting into a better habit of going to bed earlier. And then if I keep up with doing that, going to bed earlier, I can keep waking up earlier to have time to study.
Exactly. If you can keep that
right?
habit.
If I can keep that up, and that's something that I'm trying to work towards.
Yeah.
So that's just something, anyways, that I'm trying to work on. And
there's so many things. I mean, even we talk about reading the Bible. That's super important. That's how God speaks to us. That's how we're edified. But I think not only that, we need to have time to pray. Yeah. And that you can pray throughout your day. But I know for myself, oftentimes I get busy working, and it doesn't mean I'm not, I don't love God, but I don't think about it all the time. And I think setting apart time, like, I'm going to spend this bit of time, just like I schedule time to read the Word. I'm going to schedule the time, and I'm going to pray to God about just what we talked about, my friends, personal things, my family. I'm going to spend time praising God in these prayers too. Thank you for what you've done. I think there's so many disciplines that we need to get into. And as young men, it's easier for us to do it now rather than, a few years down the road when you're married and you have a screaming baby.
It's easier for us to get into the habit now, because if we get into the habit now and make it a daily part of our life, like a part of our lifestyle, then we will continue to do that even through the course of, especially when we get busy in later years. We'll keep up that. And that's something that realizing more and more, especially as I get a little older, like it's...
Yeah, you're getting right up there.
Well, I'm not, but I am. I guess everybody ages. Anyways, as you keep growing older and learning more, it's like, it's so important to get these into your daily habits. And then one day, when I have a family, you can throw that into the schedule and then they could carry it on too to their kids and going forward throughout generations.
And this moves into the leading. Let's move back into leadership. You are setting an example in your home of what a man looks like. Not only that, but also you're showing an example to your children of how a man is and how a man
and
how he loves his wife.
And how he acts. And how he leads. Yes.
How he loves his wife.
And how he disciplines and all that, right?
There's so many little things. But discipline is a massive part of it. And it's something that I need to work on in myself. But you see it, and I think now that we're talked about on the podcast, we have to do it now. That's the problem. No, it's on the podcast. Now, whoever, all of our, my mom and your mom that listen to this, they're going to be on our case about this now. So, yeah. But, so we're going to have to make sure we're very disciplined, obviously. But I think that the Christian walk is a good thing. And finding discipline and finding ways to lead well, it's going to make the Christian life better. And it's going to, I don't know, it's going to be good. It's going to be good as we continue to walk towards Christ and learn how to be better, godly leaders.
And this is another big thing that I'm really looking forward to with this podcast, is being able to grow. Is being able to grow in that, help myself with my talking, especially like in conversation. It's going to be a big help, because all the listeners that are listening right now it's quite clear that I'm not the best conversationalist.
Neither am I.
And that's okay, because it's a learning curve and it's going to just keep getting better.
Well, and I think about, this is a part of our growth as men and as
in
learning,
Christ.
And as Christ, but learning how to lead, not only in the way we act and stuff, but in conversations and stuff. And these are really amazing conversations we can have with each other. They teach us how to actually have conversations with others and how to lead others in conversations. And, if you get really good at conversations, you can lead it and be like, you know what, we're going to start talking about hunting. And then I'm going to just kind of slowly lead this conversation towards God.
And it's easier to do that, especially, like you said, when you get better at it. And then you can go and read the book Tactics.
And the thing is, you're not spending all your time just saying, like, dude, bro, I don't know
repeating. And I did repeat a couple things here too, but in this podcast. But
to me, that's Gen Z brain rot. There's so much of it. There's so much of it, and it's something. 15-second reels don't help us.
No, they sure don't.
And we spend so much time on that, so our attention spans are just short. And you listen to other Gen Zers, and your friends are all Gen Zers or whatever, and they're always like, dude. So
come on, spit it out already, Devin.
But that's how they are, and so you train yourself. But this is a good way of training to be better at conversation, to be able to have conversations with other people and to be able to lead these conversations towards
that's something
Jesus.
too, is being around people that are willing to have even long conversations help a lot. And so it's like, when it comes to you, I've noticed that whenever I get into a more deep conversation with you, it just helps my skills get a little bit better with conversations. Or when I visit with Dustin, for example, helps my conversations get a
shout out
lot
to
more
Dustin, by the
clear,
way. What a guy.
Yeah, I know, right?
On the Josh Monday podcast. What a guy. Anyways.
We'll have him on the show here yet.
At some point.
Yeah.
At some point.
Awesome guy.
It might not be able to get released, but anyways. But that just, I think learning how to be a better leader is also being the type of person that is open to deep conversations, to having conversations. And like we talked about, spending our time going off for coffee with people, what's important about that is leading the conversation and making sure the conversation is continually drifting towards Christ, drifting towards creation, drifting towards redemption, whatever the conversation is. They're going
always
this way.
Having a little bit of a toe in the gospel.
Yep.
Right?
They're moving. Exactly. And
then you getting the rest of your foot in there, right?
Exactly. And you can lead people to Christ in your conversations. And it might be a believer you're talking to who is struggling with something, but your conversations are always, I don't know where it's found, but it says seasoned with salt. Your conversations are seasoned with salt. They have flavor to them. They're rich. Yeah.
And that's kind of leads into what I was going to say here with, as a Christian, our foundation is in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's the foundation of our faith. And as long as we stay standing on that foundation of it, we always have a part and we always have a choice in what goes down in a conversation. And we have that option and continually have that option to always lead it back to Christ, because we know about it. We know it's the truth, and we know why it's the truth, and how it came to be the truth, right?
The favorite conversations I have are with people of like-mindedness. If we're Christians, we're of like mind. We have Christ in common, and hopefully we're both just chasing after him. And the conversations you have with people that are just like, man, I want Jesus. I am running after him. Those type of conversations that you can have real conversations about real life things. They're so meaningful.
Yeah, they're meaningful, and they can be fun too, and awesome. And I also like conversations that aren't so meaningful, when you get in debates with conspiracy theorists and
different things like that. There's all kinds of good, like, theology conversations where you disagree on theology, which
we're gonna eventually have something here.
And I'm going to crush you.
Oh yeah, you keep thinking that there, buddy.
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna be good, but even in all those things, in disagreements and in the playful conversations we can have, Christ is glorified in them. Even if they're just like, man, that conversation was pretty meaningless and stuff. It's just like, you know what, God, we can enjoy things. He created us to enjoy things, and we can enjoy friendship with other people.
He created us to have a sense of humor too.
Exactly.
Right?
And you can have good friendships.
He even
and stuff.
created Ford guys.
Exactly.
It's just
gotta have an F-150. If you don't have one, who are you?
I mean, come on.
Except for when it blows the spark plug out. But anyways, we don't have to go there. But I think that being godly leaders, being godly men, you can also have, in the friendships you have with men that are pushing you towards Christ, you can have real friendships where you can have meaningful debates and conversations that are literally pointless. As long as you all know that, our focus is Jesus, but we can have fun, we can play, we can do these things, as long as they're not stupid.
That's the thing too, is a lot of people get into, and I've been one of them, get into way too heated debates and take things way too seriously. Well, especially in conversation that really doesn't mean much.
No.
We both have foundation of Christ. We're both Christians.
Yeah.
A lot of those disagreements, especially between me and you, are meaningless in the long run.
We might have strong opinions, but...
Yeah, strong opinions. That's about it.
Frank, it was good talking with you again.
Yeah, good talking to you too, Devin.
We'll do this again.